Hi there, it's Dr. Anderson here. Welcome to my second episode of Optimal Health, Optimal Life. And I am joining you here today, and we're going to talk about optimal diet for longevity and health. So, the idea is we want to live a long life to a very old age, but we want to have a high quality of life and basically die healthy. So we don't want to be getting up to 100 or more. And really nowadays, 120 is realistic and doable. So when we're there at 120, we want to do the things that we want to do. We want to be active. We want our minds to be clear. We want to have social lives and basically live a really good life until we're ready to move on to the next adventure. So, diet is one of the things that you really can control. Even though there's a lot of temptations out there, that's something that you can choose to do. And I'm going to show you why and how easy you can make it so that it doesn't have to be this big, huge drama, right? So, I have done some studying on this, and I was really, really curious to see if how I was eating was going to help me live a healthy life and a long life. And originally, I was going for 130, but as I was looking into this and listening to different things, it makes sense that really I should be shooting for about 180, because if we can do 120, then we can probably add on half of that, which is 60, which would be 180. So now I think I'm going to go for 180. Why not? Let's shoot high, right? So, full disclosure, I have been vegan for about 30 years now. So, I was really curious to see if the literature, if the studies were supporting to see that a vegan lifestyle would help me live longer and healthier. And I am so happy to tell you that right now, that's what the evidence is showing. Yay for me. So I'm going to show you how you can do this too. Now, you will hear some people say, well, what about B12? And what about essential fats? And what about vitamin D and protein and iron and all this stuff? Well, guess what? You can get everything that you need in the plant world. Some of them are a little bit harder nowadays, just with how we're living, but with a little bit of supplementation, it makes it really easy. So, for essential fats like DHA, which is necessary for our brain development, you are going to want to do things like seaweed, nori, spirulina, chlorella. And all you have to do is add some of these powders to your smoothies if you're doing a smoothie in the morning. So it's super easy. You can have some seaweed salad, you can have nori wrapped vegetables. Super easy. You can get your omega-3s that way. You do get some DHA, but just to be safe, I do take a marine-based DHA supplement because I want to make sure that my brain is getting all the nutrition it needs. Easy. Spirulina also has some B12 in it. I do some nutritional yeast, but I also will take a B12 supplement, if not every day, maybe every other day. I want to make sure, again, that I'm getting the B12 is so important for a lot of cofactors of reactions that occur in the body. It's important for a lot of things. And we're going to go into some of these other topics in the future, so don't worry, right? I also add chia seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds, walnuts, edamame, kidney beans, purslane. Purslane, by the way, is a weed that probably is growing in your garden. And if you don't spray your garden, you can go out there, dig it up, and just throw it in your salad. It actually tastes really, really good. And it is a great source of alpha-linoleic acid, which is an omega-3, which can convert to DHA, but it's not perfect, so don't count on it. Now, here's where it gets a little dicey. And there is one researcher, a biochemist, he's Italian, and he wrote a book, The Longevity Diet. And from what he was finding was that if people added some fish, just a little bit, 2 to 3 times per week, and they were choosing fish that were high in the omega-3 fats like salmon, anchovies, sardines, cod, trout, clams, and shrimp, that also could contribute to a longevity diet. But then I would listen and watch some other YouTube programs or podcasts and read some books. And what I was finding from there, from people like Neil Barnard, who is he runs the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, or PCRM, and they were finding that if you looked at vegetarian diets, vegan diets, and like a pescatarian diet where you're eating mostly vegetables but maybe adding in some fish, that the vegans fared better as far as things with decreasing heart disease, cancer, and that type of thing. And today I was watching a documentary on YouTube that was titled Leading Cause of Death, Delay of Death with Veganism. And there was a nurses study done about 40 years ago, and they've done a follow-up recently. I think it was around 2015. So it was like 35 years later. And they followed up with their study with this large group of nurses. And they did a competing risk analysis, and they found that one egg equaled the equivalent of smoking 5 cigarettes per day for 15 years for women. And that 1 cup of oatmeal fiber extended a female or increased her health and extended her life the equivalent as if she jogged 4 hours per week. So something that has a lot of fiber versus something that is coming from an animal. So I'm going to leave this up to you, but one caveat: if you do have fish, you have to pay attention where you're getting the fish from. There are so many farm fish out there. You've got to get wild, but even if it's wild, it could be contaminated because we basically have used our oceans as big toilets, and everything goes down the drain and it goes into the ocean and it gets concentrated into the fish and the crustaceans, especially at the bottom of the ocean, because everything filters down. And there really is no safe place in the ocean, even in remote areas. And then if it's not heavy metals, it's plastics that get concentrated in fish. There's little BPA, little microplastics that get concentrated in them. But so when you eat the fish, you also eat hormone disrupting chemicals and these plastics that disrupt chemicals even more. And it's really sad because I actually did used to like fish right before I became vegan. It was one of the things that I put off taking out of my diet. So it's a problem. So that I leave it up to you, but what you can do is you can do things like 1 day a week you go meatless. So PCRM has their meatless Mondays, and they have a whole thing that you can kind of sign up for. They send you recipes and they give you ideas of what to eat. And there are tons and tons of information now. I looked today on I think it was on Netflix, how many vegan films there are, and how many people doing vegan blogs, and how many vegan cookbooks, and there's vegan restaurants, and there's all this stuff out there now. So you do not have to fly solo on this, right? The other thing that was found is keeping the protein intake low. So this is speaking to those people who are like, where do you get your protein from? Well, every single piece of food has protein in it, just some more concentrated than others. So everybody thinks like meat or fish or chicken has the most protein. But guess what? Everything does. And you want to actually keep it low because there's a couple of things that goes on with protein, but it can be inflammatory. So under the age of 70, so between like 18 and 70, so after your formative years and before age 70, and I'll talk just briefly about that, you want to have 0.31 to 0.36 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So if your head just exploded and you went, oh my God, grams, what? Yeah, you'd have to do a little math, but this is going to help you a little bit. So for a 130-pound person, then that's going to be about 40 to 47 grams. And for a 200-pound person, that's going to be somewhere around 60 to 70 grams. Okay, so if you're looking on your labels, and you should be, or you can look up like what's equal to 1 ounce of, a piece of meat, what that's equal to. But mostly you want this to be beans, chickpeas, legumes, green peas as your main source of protein. That's really where you want this to come from. So over the age of like 65 to 70, what this one researcher found was that people who are living longer tend to increase their protein. So this may come because of something with muscle wasting. This is a problem basically as actually after the age of 25. So you don't even think of 25-year-olds as being old, right? But after age 25, we lose a bit of muscle. And when you lose your muscle, you lose kind of your powerhouse of your body because it stores a lot of energy there. It's sort of little motor machine. So you want to keep as much muscle on your body as possible. So I'm safe for a while until I hit 70, and then I have to figure this out about how I'm gonna. He recommends to slightly increase your protein and then also increase your consumption of animal products. So I'm hoping by then they have some other information, but I gotta bring this to you. So right now I'm, winning with having a vegan diet, and I have to figure out what I'm gonna do around 70. I think exercise is going to help tip that scale to keep the muscle. And we'll have that conversation next week about optimal performance and movement. The third thing is to avoid sugar. This is responsible for aging you. This will age you so quickly, and it will contribute to an early death. So watch your sugar. There's sugar in everything. Everything that's processed probably has sugar in it. So read your labels, look how much sugar. They give recommendations, which I think are still too much as far as how much sugar you should have or can have. And it's, the pyramid that they kind of sold to us is not accurate, because at the top they put sugar. Well, we don't need sugar to live. We need glucose, which is different than eating table sugar or fructose or honey or things like that. You don't need sugar. Another part of this is to eat good fats. So within a vegan diet or a diet primarily plant-based, and side note on this too, all right, I should have really prefaced I've been a plant-based vegan for almost 30 years because I try not to be a junk food vegan. So with junk food vegans, you can find things that are processed like Oreos. They're vegan. There's no animal products in it. Yeah, but I don't want to eat an Oreo, right? You want to eat as many vegetables as possible, as colorful as possible. And that's going to give you a lot of the vitamins and the minerals you need, which is, again, a topic for another day. And I'll talk about more, but you want to choose things that are coming from your farmer's garden. And if you can grow it yourself, even better. And that is, again, the best thing, because you know exactly what's going into your soil. You know exactly what you're putting in your mouth. And you're not wondering, is it genetically modified? Did they use pesticides? Did they use chemicals? Did they pick it ripe? So number one would be growing it yourself. Number two would be a farmer's market where you can have that relationship with the farmer. And number three is going to your store and buying things that are organic or pesticide free and that type of thing. Back to the oils. So good fats. So we used to think that having a low fat diet was going to be healthy for our hearts, right? This is what was sold to my dad when he had his heart attack. Low fat, everything's got to, but it's interesting because if you look at it, it was low fat, high sugar, which is very inflammatory as well. So don't get me started on the American Heart Association and their recommendations for heart disease because it's not really what it should be. Where am I? Great. Olive oil, coconut oil, good to cook with nuts and seeds, 1 ounce per day. Oh, yeah, that's what I was getting to. So, with the nuts and seeds, what did I read? It was like 1 or 2 handfuls of nuts dropped something. Ugh, too much writing, too much information, guys. Anyway, it decreased disease. I can't remember. I think it was cancer. Sorry about that. I will get back to you on that, right? And you want to avoid saturated fats from animal products, which is going to be from meat, chicken, fish, and everybody thinks chicken is healthier and it really isn't. So you can have the saturated fats from coconut and avocados because you're only going to eat a certain amount of them and they're not going to create that inflammation and damage. You want to consume dense nutrients and superfoods, things that are high in vitamin and mineral content. So I'm at a stage in my life where I want to make every calorie count. I don't want to eat a lot of crap that's going to add calories to my diet without having nutrition. So this is where those superfoods come in, things that are really they're vibrant in color. You can just see the nutrition oozing from them. As I said, a lot of plant foods. If you're looking down at your plate and you see a sea of white, beige, cream, and brown, you are not getting enough nutrition. Let's put it this way. You want to see a nice, colorful plate with only a few buffer neutral colors on there. So maybe like cauliflower. But now you can get purple cauliflower and green cauliflower, right? Another recommendation is to consume the foods of your ancestors. I don't know how I feel about this because my ancestors ate definitely a lot of meat. I'm basically Eastern European and Northern Europe. So, yeah, maybe I could do potatoes, cabbage, carrots, but they ate a lot of meat too. They ate a lot of bread, which I do not do well with. And it's just not what I'm into. Now, what I have been trying to have more of is sauerkraut, which is not my favorite fermented food, but I am trying with that. So that's another thing you can look at. Look at the food of your ancestors, see what kind of resonates with you, and go with that. Now, there is another topic for another day, but I'm going to mention it because it is super important. Believe it or not, our body thrives on stress. I know that sounds crazy. So, what I mean by that is our forefathers, our ancestors, their systems would get stressed by not having food. They would go through periods of basically fasting and then they would feast. So they did eat animals, but also think about what they ate. They ate wild animals who grazed on grasses that had not been sprayed with chemicals or tainted with water that had been polluted. And they had a relationship with that animal. And usually, because they had to go out and kill it, it's not the same as going to a grocery store and picking up a plastic coated piece of meat off a shelf that's been factory farmed and all that energy on it and fed inflammatory grains and whatnot. It's not the same thing. So when people start talking about the paleo diet, it drives me crazy because it's not the same as our ancestors. It can't be. Okay, I'm digressing. Anyway, when you go through periods where you are not eating, I like to call this restricted eating. Some people will call it intermittent fasting. You are going to have periods that you're eating and then not eating at all. And what that does is gives your gut a chance to renew and your system to kind of detoxify and It's called autophagy. Basically, like a Pac-Man, it eats the cells that are dying, dead, or even possibly cancerous. It also helps kind of reset our metabolic system so that we can have a kind of rev up our engine again. So, kind of letting the engine relax so we can rev it up. So, with this, I'm going to do another broadcast on this, but it's based on what your situation is. So if you are overweight, where your waist circumference is bigger than your hips, that means you're at risk for diabetes if you don't already have it. And so you're having blood sugar issues. If you are already at a normal weight, you would do this a bit differently. So I just want to kind of put these general guidelines on there, but look at it as only eating at least in a 12-hour window. So let's just say you eat at 8 in the morning and stop eating 8 at night, and that's it. I tend to do better with a 8-hour eating window, which is like noon to 8, and then 16 hours of intermittent fasting. But I'm not like crazy about it. That's just kind of how it works for me because in the mornings I'm either training or I am working. And so noon just works really well. Okay. In these studies, they are saying that most of these longevity living people are actually eating breakfast and then another meal. Often they're skipping lunch and just having dinner, or they do breakfast and lunch and skip dinner. Especially if you're overweight, that's usually tends to work better. So again, I'm going to be talking more about this, but you do want to try to stress your system out because of this sort of feast and famine type of thing, and it gives your system a rest. And it most importantly, it stores and burns fat instead of sugar, which is what we normally use for our energy. And sugar, I mean by glucose, and glucose, I mean by the carbohydrates you eat, whether they're simple or they're complex, meaning fruit sugar, honey, sugar, that type of thing, and complex carbohydrates like legumes, whole grains, that type of thing. All right, we're going to wind this up, I swear. You don't want to eat anything, however, about 3 hours before you go to bed. It's not a good idea to eat and then go to bed. If I do have something to eat a little bit later, it's very light. Eating with friends and family is another thing. There is a lot of the social aspect. Remember, when we're looking at these people who have lived a long life, even if they're 100 years old now, you look back to what that would have been like in 1920, which is a lot different than 2020. And a lot of the things that we're exposed to now or have grown up with, they didn't have back then. And there was a lot of community, there was a lot of eating with family and friends. So that social aspect of eating is important. Now most of us are sitting there with our phones and our computers. We're just mindlessly shoving food in our mouth. We're not thinking about it. We're not having a relationship with it. And that social aspect is huge, huge for mental health and well-being. Our microbiome, which is the good bacteria in our gut, is another thing to help support because that can mean the difference between being healthy and having diseases pop up. So we're going to be talking about that more. And gut integrity. So if you are eating all this good food, but you have a gut that is leaky and letting things through that it shouldn't, that's going to create a whole range of problems too. So you want to be able to absorb the nutrients in your gut. So these are going to be topics for the future. Let me know what you want to hear about. And I hope that you really enjoyed this. This is a lot of information. I know I just threw out at you. So we talked about a couple of things you can do, like going meatless one time a week or one meal a day. Start there. Eating with your friends and family instead of eating by yourself and taking time to eat. Whoop. Possibly decreasing your window of time you're eating. You can start with 12 hours and see how that feels, and making sure that you're not eating at least 3 hours before you go to bed. And of course, adding a ton of vegetables to your plate. It should mostly be vegetables, at least half of your plate vegetables, maybe even three quarters. And that adding in things like legumes and beans and nuts and seeds and that type of thing so that you're getting your good fats. All right, everybody, have a great night. I will see you next week, Tuesday at 6:30, and we are going to talk about optimal movement for performance. Thanks so much. Bye.